Nina Torres had been staring at the same crack in the ceiling for the past 3 minutes. It was shaped like a lightning bolt, stretching from the corner of the dining room all the way to the edge of the old chandelier. She'd memorized every crack, every stain, every imperfection in Giuseppe's Italian restaurant during her 2 years of working there. Right now, at 2:47 in the afternoon, the lunch rush was finally dying down and her feet were killing her. She balanced 3 plates on her left arm like she'd done 1,000 times before. Spaghetti carbonara for table 6, chicken parmesan for the couple by the window, and a simple margarita pizza for the businessman who came in every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. He always ordered the same thing. Always left exactly 15% tip. Never looked up from his phone. "Here you go," Nina said with a smile that had become automatic, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore, but was convincing enough for customers who barely noticed her anyway. The businessman grunted without looking up. Nina's smile stayed plastered on her face as she walked back toward the kitchen. Her lower back ached, the kind of deep, persistent ache that came from standing for 8 hours straight, and she still had another shift tonight. Double shifts had become her normal. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Sometimes Sunday if Giuseppe needed extra help. The restaurant wasn't fancy. It had red checkered tablecloths that had seen better days, walls covered in faded photos of Italian countryside, and the constant smell of garlic and tomato sauce hanging in the air. But it was honest work, and Giuseppe was kind. He never yelled when she dropped a plate or forgot to refill someone's water. He'd simply pat her shoulder and say, "It's okay, Nina. Tomorrow is another day." Nina pushed through the swinging kitchen door and nearly collided with Antonio, the head chef and Giuseppe's grandson. "Careful there." Antonio laughed, balancing a tray of steaming pasta. "You trying to give me a heart attack?" Sorry, Nina said, moving aside. "Just tired." "You're always tired," Antonio observed, not unkindly. "When's the last time you took a day off?" Nina had to think about it. 2 weeks ago? Maybe 3? Antonio shook his head but didn't say anything else. Everyone who worked at Giuseppe's knew Nina's situation. She wasn't just working to pay rent. She had her younger brother Tommy to think about. 15 years old and still in high school. Their parents had died in a car accident 4 years ago, and Nina had become his legal guardian practically overnight. She was only 24 at the time. 28 now. Sometimes she felt 50. She grabbed a pitcher of water and headed back out to make her rounds. That's when she noticed it again. The piano. It sat in the far corner of the restaurant, partially hidden behind a decorative room divider covered in fake ivy, an old upright piano from the 1950s, its wood dark and glossy despite years of neglect. The keys were yellowed like old teeth and a thin layer of dust covered the top. Giuseppe's wife had played it decades ago, back when the restaurant first opened. Now it just took up space. A relic, a decoration, something people occasionally glanced at but never really saw. Nina saw it, though. Every single day she couldn't help herself. As she passed by, she let her fingers brush across the closed keyboard cover. The wood was cool and smooth. She felt that familiar tightness in her chest. The one that appeared whenever she thought too much about the past. About the letter she'd received 9 years ago. The one with the Juilliard School logo at the top. Full scholarship. Her dream. Everything she'd worked for since she was 6 years old and her mother first put her tiny hands on piano keys. She'd never even gotten to visit the campus. 2 weeks after the acceptance letter arrived, her parents were gone. Tommy was only 11. There was no question about what came next. You don't abandon your baby brother to chase dreams. You grow up fast. You get a job. You make it work, Nina! Table 9 needs more bread. Giuseppe called from behind the counter, pulling her back to reality. On it, she called back, forcing herself to move away from the piano. The afternoon dragged on. More customers filtered in. More plates, more smiles, more, "Is everything okay with your meal? And can I get you anything else?" Her notepad was covered in scribbled orders. Her apron had a new marinara stain. Standard Tuesday. Around 4 o'clock, during the brief lull before dinner service, Nina finally sat down in the back room. Her feet screamed in relief. She pulled out her phone and checked her messages. One from Tommy. "Got a B on my math test," followed by a celebration emoji. Nina smiled for real this time. She typed back quickly, "Proud of you." "Pizza tonight to celebrate?" "You work too much for pizza," came his reply. "Ramen is fine. Nina's heart squeezed. Her brother never complained, never asked for things, never made her feel guilty about their situation, which somehow made it worse. She opened her banking app. $342 until payday. Rent was due in a week. She'd make it, barely, like always. Giuseppe poked his head into the break room. "Nina, you okay to cover the dinner shift?" Maria called in sick, another double. That made 4 this week. Nina felt the exhaustion in her bones but nodded anyway. "Yeah, of course. You're a good girl," Giuseppe said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Nina wondered what she'd do without this job. Without Giuseppe's patience and Antonio's terrible jokes and the regulars who remembered her name. It wasn't Juilliard. It wasn't Carnegie Hall or European concert tours or any of the dreams she'd once had. But it was something. It was stability. It was rent money and grocery money and making sure Tommy could stay in school and have a normal life. By 6 o'clock, the dinner crowd started arriving. The restaurant filled with conversation, clinking glasses, and the constant background noise of the kitchen. Nina moved through it all on autopilot. Take orders, deliver food, clear tables, smile, repeat. She didn't notice the expensive car that pulled up. Outside, she didn't see the group of men in designer suits stepping out. She was too busy wiping down table 4 and wondering if she had enough energy to help Tommy with his homework. When she finally got home around 11, the piano sat, silent in its corner, waiting. It had been waiting for years. Waiting for someone to remember it was more than just furniture, more than just decoration, that it still had music inside, if only someone would take the time to listen. Nina passed by it again, her fingers trailing across the wood one more time before she headed back to the kitchen. She didn't know that in less than an hour, everything would change, that the worst moment of her entire week would somehow become the best thing that ever happened to her. She just knew her feet hurt. Her shift was only half over, and table 7 needed their check. Sometimes life's biggest moments start exactly like that. Ordinary, unremarkable, just another Tuesday at work. The black Mercedes pulled up at exactly 7:15. Nina noticed it through the front window because you couldn't help but notice a car like that. It looked like it cost more than she'd make in 5 years, maybe 10. The kind of car that made you wonder what it felt like to never check your bank account before buying groceries. 4 men stepped out, all wearing suits that probably had their names stitched inside, all moving with that particular kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. The one in front was tall, maybe 6'2", with perfectly styled dark hair that somehow looked both casual and expensive. He was talking loudly on his phone, not even looking where he was going as he pushed through the restaurant door. Nina was refilling water glasses at table 3 when they entered. She watched Giuseppe hurry over to greet them, the way he did with all customers. Extra friendly, extra welcoming. Giuseppe treated everyone like family, whether they ordered the cheapest pasta or the most expensive wine. "Welcome, welcome," Giuseppe said, gesturing toward a large table near the center. "Please sit anywhere you like." The tall man barely glanced at him. He was still on his phone, talking about stock prices and quarterly earnings and a bunch of other words that meant nothing to Nina. His friends followed him to the table, and one of them actually snapped his fingers at Giuseppe. Actually snapped. Like Giuseppe was a dog, Nina felt her jaw tighten. She'd seen rude customers before. Plenty of them. But something about these guys rubbed her the wrong way immediately. "Nina," Giuseppe called, waving her over. "Take care of table 8, please." She took a deep breath and grabbed her notepad. Put on her customer service smile, the one that hid everything else. As she approached the table, she could hear their conversation. "This place is charming," one of them said, and Nina could tell he didn't mean it as a compliment. "Very authentic." "Victor wanted Italian," another replied. "Though I suggested we go to Marcello's downtown." "That place charges $40 for pasta," the tall one, Victor, apparently said. He'd finally put down his phone. "I'm not paying Manhattan prices for noodles and sauce. This'll do fine." Nina arrived at their table. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with some drinks?" Victor looked up at her for the first time. His eyes did that thing, that quick, dismissive scan from head to toe that some people do to service workers, like he was calculating her worth in half a second and finding it wanting. "Water. Tap is fine," he said, already looking back at his phone. "And bring some bread. The good kind, not the cheap stuff." We only have one kind of bread, sir, Nina said politely, but it's made fresh daily. Whatever. He waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. The other men ordered drinks. Expensive wine that Nina knew Giuseppe kept in the back for special occasions. The kind with names she couldn't pronounce. She wrote everything down carefully and headed back toward the kitchen. Table 8 is going to be difficult, she muttered to Antonio as she passed the order through. Rich guys? The worst kind, Antonio grimaced. Good luck. Try not to spill anything on them. We can't afford a lawsuit. He was joking, but Nina felt the truth in it. People like that, they could ruin Giuseppe's little restaurant with one bad review, one complaint to the right people. She'd be extra careful tonight. The next 40 minutes were exhausting. Victor and his friends were demanding in that casual way wealthy people often are. They didn't yell or throw things. They just expected perfection and made it clear when they didn't get it. The bread wasn't warm enough. The wine was wrong, even though they'd ordered it specifically. The pasta was too al dente, then too soft when Antonio remade it. Nina kept smiling, kept apologizing, kept bringing things back and forth from the kitchen. Her feet, which had already hurt before, now felt like they might actually fall off. This is why I hate these small restaurants, she heard Victor say to his friends when she brought the remade pasta. No standards, no proper training. Nina bit the inside of her cheek, set down the plates gently. Is there anything else I can get for you? Not unless you can improve the ambiance, Victor said. He leaned back in his chair, looking around the restaurant like it was a museum of sad things. His eyes landed on the piano in the corner. Actually, yeah. What's that doing there? It's a piano, sir. I can see that. His voice had that edge of irritation. Does anyone play it? Not usually. It's mostly decorative now. Victor looked at her, then at his friends, then back at her. A strange smile crossed his face. The kind of smile that made Nina's stomach drop. You work here, right? He said, Yes, sir. I'm your server. Right, so you should be able to provide proper service. He gestured toward the piano. Go play something. We need some atmosphere. This place is dead quiet. Nina felt the heat rising to her face. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm a waitress, not a pianist. I'm here to serve food. Come on. One of Victor's friends chimed in. It's just a piano. How hard can it be? Play chopsticks or something? The restaurant had gone quieter. Other diners were glancing over, sensing the tension. Nina could see Giuseppe watching from near the kitchen, his face worried. I really can't, sir. I have other tables to attend to. Victor pulled out his wallet. Nina watched, stomach sinking, as he extracted a crisp $100 bill. He laid it on the table, smoothing it out with his fingers. Deliberately. Slowly. There. He said. Now you're properly motivated. Play something, and this is yours. Easy money? Sir, I really don't think... What's the problem? Victor's voice got louder, sharper. Are you telling me this restaurant can't provide basic entertainment? Giuseppe, right? He turned toward the owner. You should train your staff better. When a customer makes a reasonable request, they should accommodate. Giuseppe hurried over, hands raised in a placating gesture. Sir, please, Nina is our waitress. We don't have piano entertainment here. Then why have a piano? Victor demanded. It's taking up space. Either use it or get rid of it. And right now I'm asking politely for some music while we eat. Is that really too much to ask? His friends were grinning now. They had their phones out. Nina realized with horror that they found this funny. This was entertainment for them. Watching her squirm. Watching Giuseppe try to manage an impossible situation. Look, Victor said, his voice dripping with condescension. I'm trying to be nice here. I'm offering money. I'm being patient. But maybe this place is just too low class to understand proper customer service. Nina felt something crack inside her. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and internal, like a thread snapping. She'd spent years bending. Years smiling through exhaustion and rudeness and people who treated her like she was invisible. Years of swallowing her pride and her past and her dreams. She looked at Giuseppe. The old man's face was pained, but he gave her the smallest nod. Whatever you decide, his eyes said. I support you. Nina looked at the $100 bill on the table. At Victor's smug face. At his friends with their phones ready to record what they clearly expected would be humiliating. She set down her notepad carefully on a nearby empty table. Fine, she said quietly. I'll play something. Victor leaned back, triumphant. Now we're talking, see? That wasn't so hard. Nina walked toward the piano. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else entirely. Something that had been locked away for 9 years. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. She pulled out the piano bench. The legs scraped against the old wooden floor. The sound echoed in the now silent restaurant. Everyone was watching. Nina sat down on the piano bench and immediately felt how worn the cushion was. Springs poked through the fabric and the bench wobbled slightly on uneven legs. She adjusted her position, and the movement caused a small cloud of dust to rise from the keyboard cover. Her hands rested on her lap. She could feel everyone's eyes on her back. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Even the kitchen noise had stopped. She heard someone whisper something to their dinner companion. Heard Victor's friend stifle a laugh. They were expecting a disaster. A waitress fumbling through "Mary Had a Little Lamb" or maybe "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Something to laugh about later. Something to post online with a caption like, "You won't believe what happened at this random Italian restaurant." Nina lifted the keyboard cover. It stuck slightly, old hinges protesting, and then fell open with a dull thud. The key stared back at her. Yellowed ivory, some slightly chipped at the edges. Middle C had a tiny crack running through it. The black keys were dusty. She lifted her hands and let them hover over the keys. 9 years. It had been 9 years since she'd really played. Oh, she'd touched pianos here and there. In the mall once when no one was looking. At a friend's apartment years ago. But actually played? Truly played? Not since the week her parents died. Her fingers trembled. Not from nervousness about the audience. From something deeper. From muscle memory that went back to childhood. From thousands of hours of practice. From a part of herself she'd locked away because it hurt too much to remember what she'd lost. "Any day now," Victor called out from his table. His friend snickered. Nina took a breath. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. The first note was soft. Almost questioning. Middle C, clear and pure despite the piano's age. Then another note. And another. Her right hand began a melody, gentle at first, while her left hand found the bass notes. For about 5 seconds it sounded simple. Pleasant. Background music. Exactly what you'd expect from a waitress trying to humor a rude customer. Victor turned back to his friends. Already bored, already reaching for his wine glass. Then Nina's hands began to move faster. The melody shifted, became more complex. Her fingers started dancing across the keys in patterns that shouldn't have been possible for someone who supposedly didn't play. The gentle tune transformed into something powerful. Something that demanded attention. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most technically difficult pieces in classical music. The kind of piece that professional pianists spend years mastering. The kind of piece that most people need an orchestra to accompany them. Nina played it alone. Her hands moved in a blur. Left hand thundering through bass chords while her right hand flew through cascading runs of notes. The old piano, despite its age and dust, responded. It sang, it roared. It whispered and shouted and everything in between. Victor's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes widened. The smug smile melted off his face like ice cream on hot pavement. "Oh my God," one of his friends whispered, phone nearly slipping from his hand. Nina wasn't thinking about them anymore. She wasn't thinking about the $100 bill or the insults or her aching feet. She wasn't even thinking about the restaurant. She was 9 years in the past in her parents' living room, playing this exact piece for her Juilliard audition video. She was every hour she'd spent practicing as a teenager. Every recital. Every competition. Every dream she'd ever had. The music poured out of her. Not just notes, but emotion. Longing. Loss. Anger. Hope. Everything she'd kept bottled up for 9 years came flooding out through her fingertips. The couple at table 6 had stopped eating, forks frozen in midair. The businessman who always looked at his phone was staring, his device dark on the table. A woman near the window had her hand over her mouth, eyes glistening with tears. Giuseppe stood near the kitchen door and Nina could feel rather than see the shock on his face. He'd known her for 2 years, watched her carry plates and refill water glasses and smile through exhaustion. He'd never known. How could he have known? Antonio had come out of the kitchen completely, spatula still in hand, white apron smudged with sauce. His mouth hung open. Nina's fingers reached the climactic section, the part where the music builds and builds until it feels like your heart might burst. She leaned into it, her whole body moving with the music now. The piano bench creaked beneath her. Her waitress apron, still tied around her waist with that marinara stain on the front, swayed with her movements. There was something beautiful about the contrast. The dusty old piano that nobody had played in years, the tired waitress in her worn uniform, and this music, this impossible, magnificent music that seemed to come from somewhere divine. A glass shattered somewhere in the restaurant. Someone had knocked it over, too mesmerized to notice. No one moved to clean it up. Victor sat frozen, all color drained from his face. His friend's phone was recording, but the grin was gone. They weren't laughing now. They looked like they'd seen a ghost. Or maybe something more unsettling than a ghost. They'd seen their own cruelty reflected back at them. Nina transitioned seamlessly from Rachmaninoff into jazz. Her hands found a Duke Ellington piece, improvisational and smooth, showing she wasn't just classically trained. She could do it all. The old piano swung through the jazz standard like it had been waiting decades to remember what it was built for. Then she shifted again. Contemporary, a piece by Ludovico Einaudi, something modern and haunting that most people would recognize even if they didn't know the name. Her hands moved with absolute confidence. No sheet music. No hesitation. Just pure perfect memory and skill. She played for 8 minutes straight. It felt like 8 seconds and 8 hours at the same time. The final notes faded into the air. Nina's hands lifted from the keys slowly like she was pulling them out of water. The last note hung in the silence, vibrating, refusing to completely die. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For 3 full seconds, Giuseppe's Italian restaurant existed in a perfect moment of suspended time. The dust motes floated in the light. The smell of marinara and garlic hung unchanged. The crack in the ceiling looked the same as always. But everything had shifted. Then someone started clapping. The businessman by the window. His applause cut through the silence like a gunshot. Then someone else joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted. People weren't just clapping. They were standing. A standing ovation in a small Italian restaurant on a Tuesday night. Some people were crying openly now. The woman who'd had her hand over her mouth was wiping tears from her cheeks. An elderly man near the back was shaking his head in disbelief, applauding so hard his hands had to hurt. Giuseppe rushed over, his eyes wet. He grabbed Nina's shoulders as she stood from the piano bench and he hugged her tight. The old man was saying something in Italian, too fast for Nina to understand, but she caught words like beautiful and magnificent and blessed. Antonio was whooping from the kitchen doorway. The other waitress, Helen, who'd been serving the other section, stood with her hands clasped over her heart. Nina looked at all of them. The regular customers who'd watched her serve them for 2 years. The new faces who'd just come in for dinner. All of them looking at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Then her eyes found Victor's table. Victor sat like a statue. His face had gone from pale to red. His friends had stopped recording. They weren't looking at their phones anymore. They were staring at Nina with expressions that mixed shame, shock, and something else. Recognition, maybe. Recognition that they'd just made a terrible mistake. The $100 bill still sat on the table. It looked small now, meaningless. Nina walked over slowly. The applause was finally dying down, people returning to their seats buzzing with excited conversation. She stopped at table 8 and looked down at Victor. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Your food will be right out," Nina said quietly. Professionally, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just proven that every assumption they'd made about her was wrong. She turned to walk back toward the kitchen. "Wait," Victor said hoarsely. Nina stopped but didn't turn around. He started, then seemed to realize he had no idea what to say. Sorry felt insufficient. Any explanation would sound pathetic. Nina glanced back at him over her shoulder. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't triumphant. It was just tired. "Enjoy your dinner," she said, and walked away. Nina pushed through the kitchen door and leaned against the wall. Her hands were shaking now, not from nerves but from adrenaline, from releasing 9 years of suppressed emotion in 8 minutes. Her heart hammered in her chest like it was trying to escape. Nina. Antonio was staring at her like she'd just walked on water. What the hell was that? She couldn't answer. She wasn't sure she had words for what just happened. She'd gone to that piano planning to play something simple, maybe a basic classical piece, embarrass herself just enough to satisfy Victor and his friends, Take the $100 and get back to work. But the moment her fingers touched those keys, something else had taken over. Something she'd been holding back for so long that it came out like a dam breaking. "You're crying," Antonio said gently. Nina touched her face. He was right. Tears were sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly. "I'm fine. I need to get back to work. Table 8 still needs their check." "Nina, stop." Antonio grabbed her shoulders carefully. "Take a minute, breathe." Giuseppe appeared in the doorway, his weathered face split by the biggest smile Nina had ever seen on him. "Nina, my dear, why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" "It didn't matter," Nina said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not a pianist anymore. I'm a waitress." "You're both," Giuseppe said firmly, "and right now you need to know something." He pulled out his phone and Nina saw his hands were trembling slightly. "People are already posting videos." "You're going to be famous, what?" Nina's stomach dropped. "No, Giuseppe, I can't. I don't want—" But Giuseppe was already showing her. 3 different people in the restaurant had recorded her performance. One video was already online, posted 2 minutes ago. It had 57 views. Nina watched the number climb to 63, then 71. The video showed her from behind, seated at the old piano in her waitress uniform. You could see her hands flying across the keys, hear the gasps from the other diners, see Victor's face in the background frozen in shock. "This is bad," Nina muttered. "I don't want attention. I just want to work and take care of Tommy and—" "Nina!" A man's voice from the kitchen doorway. Nina turned. It was the businessman from table 6, the one who'd started the standing ovation. Up close, he looked about 50, with gray at his temples and expensive glasses. "I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is David Chen. I'm a music producer." Nina's mouth went dry. "A what?" "I produce albums. I work with conservatories and concert halls. I also scout talent." David pulled a business card from his wallet and held it out. "That was the most extraordinary thing I've witnessed in 20 years in this industry." "Juilliard?" Nina took the card numbly. I got in. 9 years ago. I never went." "Why not?" The question hung in the air. Giuseppe and Antonio were watching, waiting. Nina had never told them the full story, never explained why a waitress in her late 20s worked doubles and lived in a tiny apartment and never talked about her past. "My parents died," she said quietly. "Car accident. I had to take care of my little brother. He was 11. David's expression softened immediately. "I'm sorry. That's—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's an incredible sacrifice. But Nina, talent like yours doesn't just disappear. You should be performing. Recording, teaching, something. I have to work. I have bills, I understand. But will you at least consider taking my card? Call me if you ever want to explore options. There are scholarships, programs for non-traditional students, performance opportunities that pay. You don't have to give up one life to have the other." Nina stared at the card in her hand. David Chen, producer. A phone number. An email address. A possibility she'd convinced herself died 9 years ago. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll think about it." David nodded and headed back to his table. Nina stood there, card in hand, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Nina." Helen, the other waitress, burst through the door. "You need to see table 8. What's wrong now?" Nina asked, exhausted. "Just come look." Nina followed Helen back into the dining room. The energy had completely changed. People were still talking excitedly, glancing at her, whispering. She felt exposed in a way she never had before. For 2 years she'd been invisible in this restaurant. Background, just the waitress. Now everyone saw her. At table 8, Victor and his friends were standing, getting ready to leave. Their food was barely touched. The $100 bill still sat on the table, but now there was more money. A lot more. Victor turned as Nina approached. His face was red, his jaw tight. He looked like a man who'd been publicly humiliated and knew he deserved it. "We're leaving," he said stiffly. "Your meal," Nina started, "is paid for." Victor gestured to the cash on the table. Nina looked down. $500 bills. $500. That should cover dinner and your time. One of his friends shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we were jerks, obviously, that was—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went even redder. "The video," he muttered. "It's already on Twitter. Someone tagged me. Nina didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel angry anymore either. She just felt tired. You should go, she said quietly. Yeah. Victor picked up his jacket. Then he paused. Turned back. For what it's worth. You're incredible. I mean that. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I had no right to treat you that way. It was probably the most genuine thing he'd said all night. Nina nodded. Thank you. She watched them leave. Watched the expensive car pull away from the curb. Watched them disappear into the night, probably to go back to their expensive homes and their comfortable lives. But they'd remember tonight. The video would make sure of it. Nina collected the money from the table. $500, more than she made in a week. She stared at it for a long moment, then walked over to Giuseppe. The piano money, she said, holding it out. It should go to you. Giuseppe pushed her hand back gently. No, my dear. That's yours. You earned it, Giuseppe. Nina. He looked at her seriously. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 2 years. I've seen you come in with dark circles under your eyes. I've heard you on the phone with your brother, telling him everything's fine when I know you're barely getting by. Take the money. Use it for something good. Nina's eyes filled with tears again. You're too kind to me. Your family, Giuseppe said simply. And family takes care of family. The rest of the dinner service passed in a blur. Every customer wanted to talk to her, wanted to congratulate her. The elderly man from the back asked her to play again, but Nina declined politely. Once was enough. Once was all she had in her tonight. By the time closing came at 10, Nina was physically and emotionally drained. She helped clean tables, count the register, wipe down the counters. Normal closing routine, except nothing felt normal anymore. Her phone kept buzzing. The video had spread. One version had 15,000 views. Another had 30,000. Comments poured in. Who is this woman? Someone find her! This is the most beautiful thing I've heard all year. Giuseppe locked the front door and turned to Nina. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what all this means. I'm still working tomorrow. Right? Nina asked, suddenly worried. Giuseppe laughed. Nina, you'll always have a job here. For as long as you want it. But I think... He gestured at her phone, still buzzing with notifications. I think your life is about to change, whether you want it to or not. Nina walked out into the cool night air. The street was quiet. A cab drove past, its lights reflecting off wet pavement. She pulled out her phone and called Tommy. Hey, her brother answered on the second ring. You're calling late. Everything okay? Yeah, Nina said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. Everything's okay. Actually, something kind of crazy happened at work tonight. Oh yeah? What? Nina started walking toward the bus stop. She told Tommy everything. About Victor and the piano and the performance and the video and David Chen's business card, burning a hole in her pocket. Tommy was quiet for a long moment when she finished. Then, so what are you going to do? Nina looked up at the sky. Light pollution made it hard to see stars in the city, but she could make out a few. Tiny points of light pushing through the darkness. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I think maybe I don't have to choose anymore. Between taking care of you and taking care of my dreams, maybe there's a way to do both. You know I'm almost 16 now, right? Tommy said. I'm not a kid anymore. I can handle it if you need to do something for yourself. I actually want you to. Nina felt her throat tighten. When did you get so grown up? Had a pretty good role model, Tommy said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The bus arrived. Nina climbed on, found a seat by the window. The city rolled past. Giuseppe's Italian restaurant disappeared behind her. But the feeling of those piano keys under her fingers remained. For 9 years she'd been surviving. Just surviving, working doubles and paying bills and pushing down every dream she'd ever had. Maybe it was time to start living again. Nina woke up the next morning to her phone exploding with notifications, not buzzing, exploding. The screen was filled with messages, missed calls, emails from addresses she didn't recognize. For a confused moment, still half asleep, she thought something was wrong. Then she remembered. The piano, the video, everything. She sat up in bed and opened social media. The main video had 2 million views. 2 million. In less than 12 hours. The comments kept coming, hundreds per minute. I've been crying. For 10 minutes straight. Someone give this woman a record deal, immediately. This is what real talent looks like. The way those rich guys' faces changed. Justice. There were news articles. Actual news articles. Waitress stuns restaurant with hidden piano talent. Viral video shows the power of never giving up on your dreams. One headline read, "Arrogant customer got more than he bargained for." Nina scrolled through it all, feeling disconnected from reality. This couldn't be about her. This had to be happening to someone else. Tommy knocked on her bedroom door. "You awake? Because you need to see what's happening." "I'm seeing it," Nina said, showing him her phone. Tommy grinned. "That's nothing. Turn on the TV, you're on the morning news." "What?" But he was right. Nina stumbled into their tiny living room, and there she was on the television screen. The anchor was showing the video, talking about the mystery waitress who'd captured hearts across the internet. They'd tracked down Giuseppe's restaurant. A reporter was standing outside interviewing early morning customers. "Is this real life?" Nina muttered. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Nina Torres?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "My name is Jennifer Kim. I'm the Dean of Admissions at Berklee College of Music. I hope I'm not calling too early." Nina's heart stopped. "Berklee? We've seen your video. Multiple faculty members have watched it. Nina, your performance was extraordinary. I'm calling to ask if you'd be interested in discussing enrollment. We have several scholarship programs for non-traditional students. And after reviewing your old Juilliard application, yes, we tracked it down. We believe you'd be an exceptional fit for our program." Nina sat down hard on the couch. Tommy was watching her, eyes wide. I have responsibilities. My brother, my job. I can't just—" "We understand," Jennifer interrupted gently. "We work with many students who have families and jobs. We have evening classes, online options, payment plans. Nina, talent like yours deserves to be nurtured. Let's at least talk about possibilities. Would you be willing to meet?" Nina looked at Tommy, her little brother who wasn't so little anymore, who was nodding at her frantically, mouthing, "Say yes." "Okay," Nina heard herself say. "Yes, I'd like to talk." After she hung up, Tommy hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. "This is it, Nina. This is your chance." "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," Tommy said. "You should be. It means it matters." The calls kept coming. Other music schools, recording studios, concert venues asking if she'd perform, a producer wanting to discuss an album, a documentary filmmaker interested in telling her story. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was everything she'd dreamed about when she was 18, and everything she'd thought she'd lost forever. Nina went to work that afternoon. She had to. She'd already missed enough shifts lately, and Giuseppe had been too good to her. But when she arrived at the restaurant, everything was different. There was a line outside. An actual line. People waiting to get into Giuseppe's Italian restaurant on a Wednesday afternoon. Some of them held phones, clearly hoping to see the famous piano-playing waitress. A few reporters lingered near the entrance. Giuseppe met her at the door, his eyes twinkling. "You've brought me more business in one day than I've had in a month." The phone won't stop ringing. Everyone wants reservations. "I'm so sorry," Nina said. "I never meant to—" "Sorry?" Giuseppe laughed. "Nina, this is wonderful. But we need to talk. Come, sit." They sat at a corner table, away from the curious eyes. Giuseppe folded his hands on the checkered tablecloth. "You have opportunities now," he said. "Real opportunities. The kind that don't come twice, but I work here. You need me. I'll manage. I always do." Giuseppe reached across and patted her hand. "Nina, when my wife was alive, she used to play that piano every night. Did you know that?" Nina shook her head. "Beautiful music. It filled this place with life. When she died, I couldn't stand to hear it, so it sat silent for 20 years. Then you played it last night, and for a moment I felt her presence again. You reminded me that beautiful things shouldn't stay buried just because we're afraid or hurt, or think we don't deserve them." He squeezed her hand. "Don't bury your talent anymore. Whatever you need to do, whatever path you need to take, you have my blessing. And you'll always have a home here if you need it," Nina cried right there in the restaurant. Again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than in the past 9 years combined. 2 weeks later, Nina sat in a coffee shop across from David Chen, the music producer. They'd met several times now, discussing possibilities. David had connections everywhere. A benefit concert for music education programs, a spot on a late-night talk show, a small recording contract with flexibility built in. The important thing, David said, is that you don't rush. You've waited 9 years. You can take time to choose the right path now. Nina stirred her coffee. I spoke with Berkeley. They're offering a full scholarship for their evening program. I could study and still work part-time. Still be there for Tommy. That's fantastic. And Victor reached out, Nina added quietly. David raised his eyebrows. The guy from the restaurant? He wrote a long apology. A real one, not a PR statement. He's donating $50,000 to music education programs for underprivileged kids. He said he wants to do something meaningful with his money instead of just... Nina trailed off. Instead of being who he was that night. People can change, David observed. Maybe. Nina wasn't sure she forgave Victor completely. Maybe she never would. But she appreciated the gesture. And at least he was trying. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Got an A on my English paper. Making spaghetti for dinner. Your turn to pick the movie, Nina smiled. Some things didn't change. Tommy still needed her. But not in the same way anymore. He was growing up. Becoming independent. And maybe that meant she could grow too. She thought about her parents sometimes. Wondered what they'd think of everything. The accident that took them. The scholarship she'd given up. The years of struggling. And now this unexpected second chance that came from one humiliating moment that turned into something beautiful. Maybe they'd be proud. Maybe they'd say she should have pursued music sooner. She'd never know. But she knew what they'd want for her now. They'd want her to be happy. To live fully. To stop just surviving and start thriving. 3 months later, Nina performed her first official concert. A small venue, only 200 seats, but it sold out in hours. Giuseppe bought tickets for everyone at the restaurant. Tommy sat in the front row grinning like an idiot. David Chen was there with several of his clients. And in the back, trying to be inconspicuous, was Victor with his wife. He'd emailed Nina asking if he could attend, promising to stay out of the way. She'd said yes. Nina wore a simple black dress, not her waitress uniform, not an apron with marinara stains, just herself, walking onto a stage, sitting at a beautiful grand piano that had been tuned perfectly. The lights dimmed. The audience quieted. Nina placed her hands on the keys. She thought about that dusty old piano at Giuseppe's, about tired feet and double shifts and pushing down dreams because life demanded sacrifice, about a $100 bill thrown on a table like an insult, about the moment her hands had remembered who she used to be. Then she began to play. The music filled the concert hall, rich and complex and full of everything she'd learned in 9 years of waiting. The technical skill was still there, yes. The training. The talent. But there was something else now, too. Depth. Maturity. The kind of understanding that only comes from struggle. From loss. From learning that sometimes the longest way around is the only way forward. She played for 45 minutes. Classical pieces, jazz improvisations, contemporary compositions. The audience sat transfixed. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Backstage afterward, Giuseppe hugged her tight. My wife would have loved to hear you play, he whispered. Tommy was next, eyes red from crying. I'm so proud of you, he said. Mom and Dad would be too. I know, Nina said. And she meant it. David approached with a couple in their 60s. Nina, I want you to meet someone. This is Patricia Donovan. She runs the scholarship program at Juilliard. Nina's breath caught. Patricia smiled warmly. We keep tabs on our lost students, the ones who got away. When we saw your video, we knew exactly who you were. That scholarship? It's still available. If you want it. Even 9 years later, Nina looked at all of them. Giuseppe, who'd given her stability when she needed it most. Tommy, who'd never once made her feel guilty for her sacrifices. David, who'd believed in her potential. Patricia, offering a dream she thought was dead. Can I think about it? Nina asked. Patricia laughed. Of course, but Nina, don't think too long. You've already waited enough. Nina walked out of the venue that night into cool autumn air. The city glittered around her. Somewhere in that city was Giuseppe's.